And I'm going to talk in a way that you won't expect. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everyone in this room to basically do what the woman on the previous panel suggested when she gave her speech about taking responsibility. We all love to come to these conferences. We love to listen to the experts. We love to sit around and talk about all the great work we're doing. We love to feel good at the end of the event. That's not what my next 5 minutes are about. They're not about all of that. They're about taking responsibility. So everybody in this room either provides resources to solve problems, or they provide some sort of project or model or enterprise to solve problems, or they try to put those two people together in a way that they solve problems. So what does that mean? What it means is we're responsible for solving the problems. It isn't somebody else. It isn't some other effort. It isn't some other group. It's us. And so at some point we have to ask ourselves some very simple questions. You're going to hear from 5 people who asked themselves these questions and then went off and answered them in a way that got us where we needed to go with respect to one or a group of problems. And when I finish, I'm just going to turn the time over and I'm going to ask each one of them to talk for 5 to 6 minutes about how they asked and answered these simple questions to get us where we want to go. Okay? So here's the first simple question. If you care about solving problems and sustainability, what will your solution look like? What will success look like? And I want you to now, when we're done, go home, get the report on the 900 crores of CSR that was invested in the first year of the CSR law. And what you will find is that 900 crores was spent following the Einstein never do it rule. Never do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So 900 crores was spent predominantly doing something that almost never looks like success. It was deployed doing what? What are they called? What do we call them? What do we always talk about? It was deployed doing projects. Projects is the opposite of what success looks like. You're going to hear from people who are going to talk about success. I don't think you will hear them use the word project. The last 2 speakers didn't use the word project. Not once did either one of those speakers use the word project. Projects are the opposite of what success looks like. The second simple question you need to ask yourself is, if I want to solve a problem, is there any way to do it that isn't scaled? Is there any way to solve a problem that isn't scaled? So that's your second indicator. Success always looks like scale. 100% of the time. Now you can go look at those 900 crores of investment from that first year of CSR, and what you will find is virtually the entire amount of money has no relationship to scale. 0 relationship to scale. So what does that mean? It means most of that money doesn't look like success. It doesn't look like solutions. And so what did most of the money get spent doing? And don't take this wrong, a lot of good work is done with that money. Most of that money is spent creating things that look good and that keep a certain group of people employed. A third of that money was spent by people inside of companies who are employed because they run those projects. 2/3 of the money was spent by hiring a consultant to run the project. Nothing that is scale will ever be run by a consultant. Zero scaled solutions will ever be run on an ongoing basis sustainably by a consultant. When you hire Ajita Shah and Megan Falone as your CSR implementers, you do not need a consultant anymore. They know way more than any of the consultants because they actually do the work of solving the problems. These 5 people do that work. They do it as enterprises, they do it as executives, they do it as sustainability-focused managers. When the SDGs were launched, I listened to 130 speakers in New York City at 7 different conferences talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. Not one of those speakers said, "Give me your money because I know how to spend it sustainably." Not one of those speakers said, "Give me your money because I know how to scale solutions." They didn't say that because they don't know how to spend the money sustainably, and they don't know how to scale the solutions. These people do. The people you should give your CSR money to have to know how to do that. If they don't, you're not creating long-term, sustainable, scaled solutions to problems. Thank you. Let's start on this end, and Vineet, you can summarize.
Hello. Yeah, so the question that David gave us was to look at innovations in the CSR spending and to try and point out something that we thought worked. So let me just start by a quick analysis of what the CSR spend shows, right? So it shows that the CSR spending is increasing. It shows that corporates are moving from what used to be infrastructural upgradation to investing in softer skills and softer interventions. And the areas of spend happen to be education, healthcare, sanitation, skill building, stuff that we've been hearing through the day. I think another thing that has happened with CSR coming in and with the corporates being invited to bring in what they're good at doing, right? So management, accountability, and bringing that into the social sector, I think what has happened is that people have started laying emphasis on counting, right? Do what you can count. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think somewhere down the line with that coming in, people have started doing things that is easier to count, right? So even when we talk about softer interventions, people are doing things that are easier to count and are somewhere forgetting the importance of processes. Now we've been hearing a lot of things throughout the day, so to come to what I think is innovative, and it's going to sound really simplistic, but sometimes innovative things are simple, is that my claim is that if we lay emphasis on the process, we will be able to achieve a lot more impact than if we lay emphasis on just what we can easily count. And if we take an example, I'm going to take the example of using the gender lens, right? So focusing on women. And I'm going to start by saying something which is going to appall everybody in this room. which is that I don't think we are focusing enough on women, right? So while we are talking, while we were listening to everything, a colleague sitting alongside said, oh, women are going to go crazy because women have to do everything now, which is true, but I think we are looking at it incorrectly or incompletely. The only thing that we seem to be bothered about is, are we looking at women as the final beneficiaries, right? So when we are counting, we are saying how many women benefited. We are counting how many women we reached out to. But that is not applying the gender lens, right? Applying the gender lens means, are we recognizing the fact that women interact with their ecosystem differently? Are we including them in the entire delivery chain of the solution and not just as the final beneficiary? And I'll go back to an example we all heard, Ajayta, right? Are we including them in defining the problem? Are we including them in developing the solution? And most importantly, are we including them in managing the solution? Because if we do that, then we'll not have this problem of how will we convince more people to use this, how will we get more people to buy into our thing, behavior change, communication, etc., etc., etc. Because they are the ones who are saying, this is my problem. They are the ones who are developing the solution. They are vested in making the solution work. And not only are they vested in making the solution work themselves, they are then going to propagate the solution further. They're going to come develop a feedback loop, tell you what's working, what's not working. It makes business sense. Right? So when we say, let's include the gender lens in our program design, we are saying, use them in the entire delivery mechanism, move from problem, solution, outcome to people, power, and change. And I think since we are in a shared value summit, why are we talking just about CSR? Right? Let's take this back to the business. Why are we looking at the woman at best as just a consumer? Why are we not seeing her throughout the value chain as our staff? What are we doing to make women actually participate in the process? And I think if we do that, a lot of problems that we keep coming back to will go away in the development sector, because we are coming up with solutions that we're then trying to market. And if we actually talk to the people and figure out what the problem is, figure out what the solution they want to develop, and most of them are being faced by women, we will have a much better chance of success, frontier market being a clear example. Thank you.
When we started to make medical devices, we came from the world of Philips, so we saw really very high technology products, and what we really observed was that these solutions were not affordable for developing countries like India. And then we also saw in the eye care sector, there was a lot of philanthropy which was available. And even if it was Bill Gates, it was not something which, it was not sustainable. There is a limit to what somebody can give. So we wanted to do something in between where we have the technical expertise or thinking like the Philips, Siemens, GE, but have the heart of a philanthropist, so that actually we focus on the problem and make it very affordable. So our solutions were designed in such a way that it makes it available. I'm very clear that CSR has to be very, very outcome based, because we found in a lot of eye care sector, we found a lot of equipments being gifted by companies to organizations, and 70 to 80% of them, I found them collecting dust. But the same thing would have been on an outcome based, where it's based on the number of people treated or number of people screened. If they were money being allotted to that, probably people would have actually worked for it. At least worst case fudged it on a regular basis. Whereas they were just given one-time capital investment and it was collecting dust. So I think there is tremendous scope that we can actually build innovative solutions, and the CSR fund can actually be only used when there is a chicken and an egg problem. So we just start with the chicken so that the whole program can start, and then later on it starts to completely build on a sustainable basis. Otherwise, it is an ongoing process, it will never happen. I just want to give a small example, and it's a real example. So Dr. Badrinath, who's a doyen of Indian eye care industry, started Shankar Netralaya. The Kanchi guru told him to collect 25 paisa. This was way back in 1970, to do outpatients department, examination. So it used to happen, and they used to give 25 paisa and give a chitty where they used to write what the prescription was. And then one day Dr. Badrinath was finding that maybe 25 paisa is a little too much for people to afford, so he removed that. And within a week, when he was walking in the corridors of Shankar Netralaya, he found some of these purchases which were thrown in the dustbin. Because when it was 25 paisa, people valued that chitti which was given. The moment it became free, it was in the dustbin. So anything which comes free, unless it is really, really required, people don't value. So the moment you make them to feel for it, definitely, even if it could be the merest 1 rupee or 50 paisa, but then there is value to it. So that is what we should do to ensure that we provide that kind of a service, and they can demand the service which is required. So it is not that if they're getting free, they get low cost service. So when they even give 1 rupee or 50 paisa, they demand the service what they want. So I think the CSR funding should be used from a very scalable, sustainable model, rather than, you know, just to facilitate a few things which is forgotten, often forgotten later.
Wonderful perspective. I think David had also a different question. He asked that, is CSR and government funding the only ways to run social enterprises? I represent a company of 4,000 people, and we are in the business process outsourcing space, and we are cash strapped. And if you want to be sustainable and scalable, you need to have efficiencies built like a corporate, but yet you need money to come in. So what are the different ways? And I heard this morning, in this world, the most important word is and not or. And number two, we don't need sympathy, we just need empathy. Given the background, I think it's very important for social enterprises to get funded through a slew of buffet of various different kinds of funding. One, obviously the investors. We have some great investors. So Lok Capital, a social impact investor, you have Catamaran, Narayan Murthy's company, you have HDFC invested in us. Thanks to them. Great. Is that enough? No. What else can you add to the kitty? Next, we have something called the center partners. Center partners are those who help us set up centers in villages. And the outlay can be as high as 2.2 crores. The question is, would we just go to a person who has money and ask the person to invest? And the answer is no. We want a person who wants to go back to his roots and do something for the place where he came from, either for himself or for his past generation. And surprise, surprise, there are hundreds of people in this world who want to reinvest back into their roots. We have only 16 centers, and of them, the last 6, we have found people like that. We are going to grow to 3 more this year. The first one already identified, and we are on the path to achieve that. So question is that, do we have people who want to go back and invest in their roots, and can you tap them? The answer is yes. The next is the government. IBPS scheme is the India BPO promotion scheme, which subsidizes centers that set up job opportunities in rural areas. And it's a fantastic scheme. We've already applied in the latest scheme that got announced a month back. We've already sought subsidy for a center in Odisha about 4 months ago. And what's wrong in doing that? That's a scheme that ensures that we do a job good, clean, and in an extremely well-planned way. And the government helps us there. The question now arises is that, do we still feel that CSR funds are not required? No, they're surely required. So we went to L&T Infotech. L&T Infotech came and told us, we have CSR funds, can we invest in you? Now, it's a complex process. People know that a lot of foundations are being shut down today because the modality of funding is under question, and where the money is being used too is under question. But when we went to L&T Infotech, we went through a KPMG audit to find out what's the best way to invest into a company like us, where they invested into 2 of our centers' assets. Assets remains with L&T Infotech till we have our own foundation, Rural Shore Foundation, created with a 12th certification. But till then, L&T Infotech gives us assets and we keep it with us. The answer is very simple. It's a question of and. We started with investors, they continue with us. We moved over to center partners who go back to their roots and support us. We have the Government of India supporting us with the IPBS scheme. And then we have CSR funding that comes from the CSR world, the 2% norm or the 2% tax that people talk about. The question is, are we satisfied? And the answer is surely yes, because this is grace. And we have grown 125% over the last 3 years, and that could have happened only through if we used multiple funding methods in a social enterprise. And the bottom line, as he says, nothing comes free, and if it comes free, no one values it. So the best is to show a profitable enterprise, keep working on it, and keep demonstrating to the ones who fund you that what you are doing is right and done in a great way. And that helps us.
Thank you. And David, your question was very simple, but I think the answer is very complex. Because if the answer was simple, I don't think 70 years after independence we would still be talking about basic indicators like literacy, access to healthcare. I don't think we would be doing that. I think somewhere we need to introspect collectively on what has gone right and what has gone wrong. And when I look back at the 70 years, I think there is a lot of effort that has been made. We've really come a long way as a nation. Having said that, I think in our thinking process, we've always been very lateral, which is in a way very good thing. But what we've also done in the process is that we've created institutions which had their own specialization, and nothing bad with it. But whatever we were trying to do, whether it is 60,000 crores available for Narega, where another 20,000 maybe crores available for sanitation, maybe another 20,000 crores available for housing, all these schemes are very good, very well structured, very good, well-meaning. However, the structure that we have created for implementation of these schemes is like a layering. So one on top of the other. So you have one village which is going to be the final beneficiary. And there are multiple institutions, multiple processes, multiple people reaching out to the same segment. So in a way, the layering should actually add the burden on top of it, but we are not seeing too much of results. That's one, I think, we need to figure out on how the institutional mechanism is going to ensure that there is a deeper dive into all these locations, especially in the rural areas, where we bring in a sharper focus and accountability that yes, we will ensure that 100% of households do get a house. We ensure that 100% of houses do get a toilet. And I think that is where the skill of the corporate sector also comes into play. While it also offsets a certain amount of challenge, when the CSR Act says that you need to focus primarily on the areas which are adjoining your own plant sites, you are, while giving a lot of value, a deep dive to the villages that are adjoining your plant, you are also creating an island of excellence in the middle of other villages which will have not much. I think the pertinent point over here, which I would like to make whenever we are talking of the efficacy of CSR programs, I think we need to start thinking of achieving 100% or achieving a zero. So when I say zero, can we ensure that there will be no malaria next year? Can we ensure that over a period of 5 years, maybe even 10 years, can we ensure that everybody in the village, in those 15, 10, 20 villages, wherever we are working, is a 10th pass? So we will at least come out of that syndrome of talking about literacy, basic healthcare. And I think this is an opportunity for all CSR institutions to really go deep dive, deliver value which is required, achieve success, achieve 100% results. And I think we've done the job.
So most of my co-panelists did decide not to introduce themselves. So I will use I'll use my 5 minutes to introduce myself as well. My name is Vineet Rai. I started in 2001 with 5,000 rupees with an aspiration to make every poor person rich. I have not made many rich, but I have converted that 5,000 rupees now into around 4,500 crores, which we have invested in various agencies, and we have probably invested in everything possible to build companies in every part of India, largely working with low income and poor people. I actually just wanted to touch on the whole idea of CSR and whether its use can create innovation and disruption of the kind that can change India. People talk about money have colors. I believe money has spirituality. So the CSR money has its own spirituality, and spirituality is that the giver wants to actually see good things happen on the ground. And therefore, the spirituality is not to really scale, but to actually do projects. And because it has been designed to do that, and there is a large number of people who actually require that spirituality, we should let it happen, because that's what it wants to do. The money who gives it and those who take it actually want to do that. But if you are seeking about innovation and disruption, then you need a different kind of spirituality. You need aggression. You require a very different way of thinking in that capital. And so when I started off, I had an opportunity to actually accept $500,000 as grant. I had 5,000 rupees, remember. I was 2 years into it. I was personally bankrupt. And this grant came from a very large development finance institution. And I didn't bat an eyelid in saying no. And I was thrown out of that institution, and they refused to talk to me for 4 years. But had I taken that $500,000 at that point of time in 2004, I would have probably reached 5 million or 10 million or $25 million in assets today, and not really $700 million. And I think that spirituality is important in case you want to chase scale. David had asked me to talk about a couple of examples of where scale can be achieved. And I'll actually give you 2 examples, one from the mainstream, where money actually was trying to solve the problem of the rich, not of the poor, but disrupted the whole poor lifestyle. And that's actually mobile phone. It was not designed, not produced to actually deal with poor people. It was helping rich people deal with rich people in a fairly convenient manner. But lo and behold, it has made probably the most significant difference in the lives of people living in the bottom of the pyramid without any intention. And that's essentially what can happen when disruption happens. On the other side, microfinance, which actually was started with the idea of disrupting how poor get financially included, has made life of large and rich banks so much easier. The banks were trying to find a way to deploy their 40% PSL, and lo and behold, I don't know how many of you know, but in 2005, actually in 2003, the total microfinance exposure in this country was 150 crore. 2005, it was 500 crore. Make a guess what it is today, 1,60,000 crores. So this is the kind of scale that can be achieved if money finds the right spirituality. And no good person, no bank was trying to do anything good. They wanted to make more money than they were making, putting in those bonds. And that's why it's important, if you're looking at innovation and disruption, you got to see what the money wants and what its owner wants. I'll stop here, thank you.
So these guys are heroes, and women are heroes. And you've heard some other particularly talented women speak throughout this event. What I'd like to encourage you to do as we step in to hear the ministers speak is I'd like you to recognize that many of the questions that you've asked today have actually been answered by your predecessors. I want you to think about that and start kind of looking at maybe these problems can be solved, but we want to take the kind of risks that could end up with us being unemployed, the kind of risks that don't normally get taken in projects. So, would anybody like to hazard a guess about the 2 most effective development investments ever made in the entire world? Actually, Vineet's, how much did you have? $100. Vineet's $100 may be the most effective development investment ever made. But let's take my comment that your predecessors have answered these questions already, and let's pose the question. What are the 2 most effective development investments in the history of the world? Everybody who asks a question about livelihoods can basically just go to an organization in India that borrowed money, something that's not usually done in our project business. They had the chutzpah to borrow money. They got their collateral from the World Food Program. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Excuse me? World Food Program. No, but what's the Indian organization that took out the loan against the World Food Program assets and took that borrowed money and revolutionized an industry and created more rural, well-paying jobs than any other development investment in history? Amul. Absolutely. The most successful enterprise, not project, enterprise development investment in history. It's your history. They're your examples. You're the scale leaders and you don't even know it. What's the other most successful development investment in history, other than Vineet's? What development investment has created 300 million jobs in India? $35 million, 35 years ago, put into building some technology. Half the people in this room would not be employed today if Sam Petroda and Bunker Roy and that team of technologists hadn't persuaded the Prime Minister to give them the $35 million to go out and invent low-cost, effective technology superior exchanges that were so much more viable in India than the stuff you could bring from the outside, that they were able to do something that they were laughed at. When they were sitting in rooms 35 years ago, Sam Petroda turned to the people in the rooms and said, when we finish, any person in any village in India will be able to call anywhere in the world, and people hooted them out of the rooms. Second, other most effective development investment in history. Not just in India, in the entire friggin' world. Yeah, it connected you to the world. It enabled all of the outsourcing businesses, all of the software development business, all of that communications. So there's two investments in India's history that I believe are more effective development investments than any made anywhere else in the world. Those are answers to your questions. One of the things that companies need to do is get together, combine their CSR, make multi-year commitments, and then with the social entrepreneurs that have enterprise models, borrow the money just like Amul did to create the Amul of creative manufacturing. That's Neelam Cheeber in Bangalore, Social Entrepreneur of the Year, 2011. Has the model for creating the Amul of creative manufacturing. That model could be moved to Africa instead of the Chinese model. How important would that be? How significant would that be for India if they created the creative manufacturing model that would save Africa from being polluted by China? So you've got that in your history. It's all right there. But some corporate leaders have to step up and say, no, I'm willing to make multi-year commitments. I'm willing to combine my money with other players' money. I'm willing to encourage them to borrow $10 million, borrow $20 million, borrow $30 million, just like Amul did, and build out those solutions. We don't do that, Chinese own Africa.